Well, welcome to another podcast series. We're in the Appalachian Bourbon Society's bar and not yet grill. Daniel's got to work on that. I want some food while
we got some snacks.
Today's topic is about starting a bourbon collection. I know when I started out, I think I had 5 or 6 bottles before I was an active collector, and I made a lot of mistakes going out first. I don't know about you, Daniel. I heard about this thing called Colonel E.H. Taylor. I'm like, okay, that's going to be bottle number 6.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
Blanton's, E.H. Taylor.
Oh, yeah.
Buffalo Trace, yeah, all the bottles you hear about when you first get started, and like most people, I overpaid for some of those first bottles as well.
I can remember asking a guy and him going to the back and like, I've got one in the back, but don't tell anybody. I'm going like, who the hell am I going to tell? I don't know anybody. I just barely started the channel at that point when I found my first E.H. Taylor. I think it was over at, I don't know, it wasn't Sherlock's, it was the other guy over there in Marietta. I'll think about it. Anyways,
yeah.
The point being that we made a lot of mistakes going in and buying a lot of things that were overpriced, and, well, today's guide is to help you through that, and because there's, even in bourbon, there are so many categories, isn't there, Daniel?
Yes, sir. There's, like you said, bourbon, there's rye, there's finished, there's plenty of options. You got single barrels and cask strength and all of those different options to choose from.
And some of the things you may have to actually go back and go on, like we was talking about cask strength and barrel strength, what's the difference? And that's a good question, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But we believe, we added up, each of us chose what we would start or we would recommend starting a bar with. And Daniel, weren't we both around $400?
We were both actually a little under $400. So.
Right. So inflation and depending on prices.
On where you live and what prices you get. But for us, we were a little under $400. So
yeah.
That's a reasonable budget to start with, I think.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I think I did a show about give me $500 and I'll build your bar for you. And we're way underneath that, and we've got some really good choices today. So I've got some notes I'm made here. So the first thing is to understand there's 2 main categories in bourbon. There's rye bourbons and there's wheated bourbons. Now, there's some other exceptions to that, but most of your bourbons will fall in one of those 2 categories. So the first thing you have to figure out is, what are you hunting? Are you hunting a rye bourbon or a wheated bourbon? Now, there is something called a 4-grain, which is like another show all about that. But most of your bourbons are going to be either rye bourbons or wheated bourbons, and it really depends on your palate what you're going to like.
Also, under the rye category, you can have a low rye or a high rye as well, too.
Very true. Some bottles will state, all bottles are required to state the proof on the bottle, but they're not required to put their mash bill. In other words, what is the percentage of rye or wheat in the mash that basically makes up the bourbon? So you may have to research a little bit. Some companies are more transparent than others.
Yeah, some put it right on the bottle for you, and then, like you said, some don't. But a little research, you can find most of them if you really want to know what's in there.
So we came up with 6 categories because Daniel and I have been working on our talking points for a while, and for me, I believe the first bottle that you should get is just a standard bourbon. When I say a standard bourbon, that would be a bourbon that has corn, rye, and malted barley of different percentages. Now, to be a bourbon, it has to have at least 51% corn. Otherwise, they can't call it a bourbon. So if it says the word bourbon on it, you can be assured that the majority of the mash is going to be corn, and then whatever percentage of rye or malted barley depends on that distillery.
Yep, that's correct. I don't have a whole lot to add on that one. You've covered it pretty good. I'm sorry.
But that's okay. I recommend for your first bottle to stay around 90 proof. 90 proof is kind of a standard that a lot of distilleries have gone with. You'll see it below 90 and above 90. But for your first bottle collecting, I would say pick a bourbon that is around 90 proof. And for me, one of my recommendations is this Jim Beam Black. It's aged 7 years, and it is exactly 90 proof. And you can see we drank a lot of it, and you can find this for around $30, pretty much everywhere.
That's a solid choice too. It's a very good choice.
Now, Daniel that wasn't the first, this is a pretty new release. Daniel recommends what got me started into bourbon.
Yeah, so this was kind of one of the first ones that got me into bourbon as well. It's the Buffalo Trace, and getting into bourbon, you're going to hear a lot of people talk about it. It is a good one to start with, and it's 90 proof as well. You can find that guy on the shelf if you look hard enough for around $35 to $40. Mm-hmm. Now you will see it sometime priced more than that, but shop smartly and wait till you find it.
Now it may be still allocated in some areas. I know for a long time here, Buffalo Trace was really hard to find. I was in the Buffalo Trace before I was hunting bourbon, and the reason I got into hunting bourbon is because I couldn't find Buffalo Trace. Yeah. So I said, well, what else is out there? And that actually spurred me to go. But I'm now seeing, at least in North Georgia, Buffalo Trace a lot of areas, and sometimes as low as $30. But that 30 to 45 is probably going to be the range. If you find it, you're going to find it for. So
yep. I've been seeing it pretty regularly on the shelves for around $40.
And I believe it's 90 proof as well.
It is 90 proof, yes, sir.
Now, this is a Jim Beam product, and this is a Buffalo Trace. Actually, is also the name of the distillery, and they're both big distilleries. You can't go wrong. It's always going to taste consistently good, whether you pick either one. They're both great choices. So that's, to me, is a good idea for your first bourbon. For the second, now I'm thinking you need to break out. Well, the one thing you've now tasted a rye bourbon, now go and try a wheated bourbon. And I, there again, still recommend that 90-ish proof level. But wheated bourbons have a different flavor. You don't get the spice you get from the rye. It's
a little sweeter generally.
A little sweeter, a little milder. And for me, I'm a big wheated bourbon fan. For me, what can I say? I like wheated bourbon. So for me, there's a lot of good wheated bourbons out there, and you can see even this one's almost gone. The Green River wheated bourbon. Now, Green River's been acquired by Bardstown, didn't they?
Bardstown, yeah.
I see those everywhere now, and if you don't see it, there's a lot of alternatives to Green River, but the Green River wheated bourbon is a fabulous way to get started in the wheated bourbons.
What's the proof on that one?
Let's see, it's 90 proof.
Okay, another 90 proof. There you go.
90 proof, and you may not know this. There's a horseshoe on the bottom. You can go and get out a quarter, and it will trap the quarter. So not only can you drink good wheated bourbon, you can play games with it.
Just need 2 bottles.
So what did you? Yeah, you just need 2 bottles, exactly.
So for my wheated, I went a little bit higher proof, but this is the Bardstown Bourbon Company. It is 106 proof. It's their Origin series. And this guy, you can find it for $50 here in Georgia. But it is a very, very solid choice for a wheated bourbon.
It is. Now, it is a little higher wheated than a lot of other wheated bourbons out there, but if you like that profile, this is my favorite Bardstown at the moment, this high wheat. Now, you will see a black label version of that, which is also wheated and bottled in bond. If you can't find that black label.
The black label will cost you a little bit more, though, for the bottled in bond. So that's why I went with that one.
So your mileage may vary depending on where you're at, but black label, high wheat label, they're both excellent wheated bourbons.
Yes. Can't go wrong.
All right, so let's see where we was. We're talking about bottled and bonds. We actually you segue into it.
Brought it up.
Bottled and bonds is basically, and I won't go through the Act of 1897, but basically a bottled bond basically says that it must be produced by a single distillery in a single season. The spirit must be aged for a minimum of 4 years, and it must be aged in a federally bonded warehouse. Because back in 1897, they had a lot of problems with adulterated whiskeys, so they created this act to make sure that the quality was what they said it was. So if you get a bottled and bond, you know it's a 4-year bourbon, it's been held in a bonded warehouse, and there's other things. If you want to read about it, you can Google the Bottled and Bond Act of 1897, but it actually kind of balanced out whiskeys so they came off at a level. They were all equal at that point. Now, you don't have to buy a bottled and bond, but bottled and bond tells you you're going to get a certain age bourbon, and there's going to be certain things with it that pretty much bring up the level of quality in my estimation. So for me,
the Bottled and Bond Act was actually the first Consumer Protection Act that was passed.
Really? Yeah. And there's if you go in, I won't tell you what some of the things they used to put in whiskey to flavor it, but it's disgusting, and the Bottled and Bond Act pretty much cleaned that up.
Yep.
For me, if you're not talking about that Bardstown Black Label Bottled and Bond, I like this Heaven Hill. This is a 7-year aged stated bourbon from Heaven Hill Distilleries, and it's one of my favorite bottled and bonds, and you generally can find that around 50, I think.
Yes, sir.
Around this area.
Purchased one last night for $49.99. They have
there you go.
Gift sets out now. Come with a Glencairn.
You know, I've seen that. That actually is a good buy. If they've got a gift package that includes this, and is it a rock glass?
No, it's a Glencairn.
Oh, it's a Glen. Well, even better. Glencairns can cost you
$20.
$20. Yeah. So. You see that gift pack? Yeah, I wrote the price on there when I bought it.
Yeah.
I bought mine for $56.99, but this has been around a while. So my recommendation is the Heaven Hill Bottled and Bond. What do you got, Daniel?
The Heaven Hill is a pretty good recommendation, but I went with the Old Forester 1897 Bottled and Bond. Now this one comes in at 100 proof, of course, because it's bottled and bond, right? But that's one of my favorite go-tos here lately, actually. As you can see, that one's over halfway gone. But it's a good, solid choice, I think.
All right, so we've covered bottled and bonds. What did we else? What was our next?
Next one, getting into some finished whiskey.
Finished whiskeys, and then that is, it confused the hell out of me when I got it. Like, finished? What do you mean finished? Do they put something in it? Absolutely, they do not. That would be an infused or flavored bourbon. Where we're talking about finished bourbons where they actually take the bourbon after it's aged and they put it in another barrel, or they take barrel staves and put it in the barrel to give it a new finish. And that finish could be toasted, it could be double oaked, it could be French oaked, it could be maple syrup barrels, it could be all kinds, it could be wine barrels. Finishing in wine casks is very popular now. So finished is going to cause you the most probably stress trying to figure out what you like, and for that a bottle share is a good way to figure that out.
Yeah, that's a good way to figure out what you like, period, is a bottle share. That way you get to sample several different things at one time, hone in on what you like.
And I would say if you don't have a group that can bottle share, a lot of bottle shops on Saturdays will have people from distributors or distilleries in their shop doing little samples. That's a great time. If you get that opportunity to go down there and taste something, it doesn't cost you anything. And sometimes you even can get a great deal on that bottle if you like that sample.
Yeah, while the representative's in there giving them out, they usually run a special on them.
Yeah, they sure do. So Because there are so many finishes, and Daniel and I are really into finished bourbons and whiskeys right now, I recommend keeping it simple. And for me, my recommendation is a toasted bourbon, where they take that bourbon out of their charred barrel and they put it in a toasted barrel. Toasted barrels is a different process from charring a barrel for aging, and it gives it different flavors. And you'll see a lot of bourbons that will say toasted or finished in toasted barrels. And for me, this short barrel, a bourbon whiskey finished in a toasted barrel, it's 94 proof, and I think it was around $60.
Yeah,
the
you
short
find
barrel?
that in our area for around $60.
Yeah. That is for me, it was a good way to get into finished bourbons. I went full tilt in another direction, and I wished I knew about toasted barrels when I first got started, because I love a good toasted barrel bourbon. But Dan, you have a different philosophy on that.
Yeah, I went a little different direction. Instead of toasted, I went with the double oak. And my recommendation in the double oak category is this Pursuit United double oak bourbon. It's coming in at 108 proof. And that one's going to cost you a little more than some of the other recommendations. That one's around the $70 price mark. But now, if you are looking for something a little bit cheaper, you could go for the Woodford Reserve double oak as well. Still a solid choice and save you about $20. But my recommendation would be the Pursuit United.
Yeah, and I also am a big fan of this Pursuit United. May not be available in all areas where the Woodford Reserve double oak would be available. So if you can't find that, Woodford Reserve is a solid choice.
That may be in the short barrel toasted, might not be in all areas either.
So short barrel is not in every state. It is in the Southeast, and of course they're based in Atlanta, so that's why we have access to it. But there are other toasted barrels like the Penelope toasted bourbon. They also have a toasted rye, a whole different issue with ryes, but a lot of people have toasted profiles for their bourbons, and I recommend a toasted. Daniel recommends a double oak. So
if you have the money in your budget, try both.
Yeah. For me, the double oak's going to have a little more savory punch.
Yep.
The toast is going to have a little more sweeter punch. Really depends. What is your palate like? What do you like?
Yeah, it really does. And that's the whole thing with bourbon. I mean, everybody is going to be a little different. So that's the fun part about exploring it is figuring out what you like and what you don't like.
So the next category we have is something that probably causes a lot of confusion. It's these cask strength or barrel proof or barrel strength bourbons. You can, I would say, Google that, but for the most part, a cask strength and a barrel strength is going to be the same thing. Barrel proof typically is right around 125 proof. Cask strength and barrel strength depends on what the entry proof is from the distillery. People like Maker's Mark put their whiskey in at a lot lower entry proof than someone that puts it in at 125, which is the maximum legal you can enter. Whiskey can enter a barrel at. So you're going to see a lot of, 105 to 125 and above, all calling themselves cask strength or barrel strength. And there again, it depends on that distillery. So because there's so much confusion about that, and when you see the store picks, a lot of them, the single barrels are cask strength or barrel proof. I recommend going with something that is easy to find and will get you into that proof level kind of gradually. So if you like the Old Forester 1897 or the 1910, I think you're going to like this Old Forester 1920, which is available everywhere, and it's a consistent 115 proof. It'll train your palate to like those higher proofs, and if you don't like them, you're not wasting a lot of money on $100 and $200 cask strength bourbons that you're just like, it's too hot. I don't like it that hot. And heat or proof isn't for everybody.
No.
So I think you kind of like baby steps. This is a good baby step for me, this was the first cask strength bourbon that I ever tried, and I still recommend it to this day. What do you have, Daniel?
So I went with the Wild Turkey Rare Breed. This is 116.8 proof from Wild Turkey, of course. But one other thing I would say about these, if you do find one that is just too hot for your palate, don't be afraid to add a couple drops of water in it and proof it down as well until you get used to drinking those higher proofs.
And I will tell you, if you are going to proof down it, don't use tap water. Use spring water, or if you can find it, limestone water, which is what a lot of the distilleries use for proofing down bourbon because it's got a high mineral content to it. So spring water, limestone water, Brita tap water, that's still got a lot of those chemicals and chlorines in it.
Yeah.
I don't recommend using just something out of your tap to water it down. Sometimes it only takes a few drops.
Yeah, we're not talking about a bunch. We're talking 4 or 5 drops tops, and I have used distilled water as well.
Distilled, that's another. Yeah. There again, there's no chemical taste to it that's going to adulterate the whiskey.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to use your tap water with all the chlorine in it. Sure.
No, and I like Brita water, but I think even that's not clean enough. I think it needs to be something that's actually been purified.
Yes, sir.
So that brings us to when you walk into a bottle shop. A lot of times, what is the first thing you see out on the and Daniel's got one over here. They're barrels. Well, what do those barrels in the bottle shop represent? Those barrels represent a single barrel that bottle shop has very likely purchased. And they've had bottles made from that singular barrel. Not a blend of several barrels like small batches are, but that one barrel. Well, single barrels can be as numerous as the clouds in the sky. I mean, everyone has got a single barrel, and it can be any number of profiles and finishes and strengths. A single barrel can be cask strength or can be proofed down to be something that is standard through all the bottles. So when it comes to single barrels, there again, my first recommendation, even though I love store picks, is not to go to a store pick, is to get a single barrel from the distillery, something that's consistent in taste and kind of gets you used to what a single barrel profile is like. For me, it was this Baker's 7. Now this is a 107 proof, so you are getting up into the strength, but to me, starting out at 120 proof is a mistake if you've not been there before. So this 107, kind of like the 115 here, kind of like gets you into the single barrels at a little higher proof, which you're going to find a lot in single barrels. But if you really like it, you can find it over and over again. Most other single barrels are going to vary in taste. They designed these Baker 7 to be, I've tasted a lot of Baker 7. I can't tell the difference from one bottle to the other. So that's the consistency is maybe something you want to try starting out with your single barrel.
Yeah.
What do you like, Daniel?
So I kind of went the same route that you did. I went with something that's going to be readily available pretty much on any shelf or in any liquor store that you walk into. I went with the Four Roses single barrel, and this is 100 proof. So good, easy sipper. But there again, something you can find on just about any shelf as well.
And did you say what the price is?
I did not on that one. That one you can find for around $50 as well.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
And it's one of the most affordable single barrels out there that's standard. In other words, they use a particular recipe with this that they use all the time. It is a single barrel. The flavor will vary a little bit from barrel to barrel, but they control that consistency when they're rotating their barrels and doing other things to try to keep it the same. So if you really like a Four Roses single barrel, the next time you buy it, it's that same quality, same taste.
Same profile. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend going straight to the store picks either, because learn what you like first, because most of those bottles too for the store picks are going to be a little pricier side as well. So you don't want to pick one of those up and find out you don't like it.
Yeah.
So.
I see a lot of store picks that, are in the $75 to $100 range. It's not hard to spend that kind of money for a store pick, and then you get it home and going like, well,
this not for me.
This is nothing. I like this one better or this one better. So store picks, single barrel store picks, is one of those things that you're really going to have to do your homework on, and hopefully you can get a taste from your bottle shop and know what you're buying before you buy it.
But now I will say too, I'm not against store picks. I think there's some great selections out there, but start with something like what we have in front of us. Figure out what you like before you go in to start buying the store picks. And then that way, when you do go make your first store pick, you've got a better idea whether it's going to be something you actually like or not. But there are some great store picks out there.
Well, Daniel, when you decided to collect bourbon, I mean, I was drinking bourbon probably before I was 18. Whole nother story. Because everyone had Jack and Coke when they were like one of the first things you drink. But when you actually got into bourbon, you said, I'm going to. What is the first bottle you actually started hunting?
I honestly don't remember what the first bottle that I started hunting was. I do remember prior to me getting into bourbon, we had, a little bar in the house. We had your typical stuff, your mixers and stuff for cocktails.
Jack Daniels.
yeah, old number 7, yeah.
Evan Williams, Jim Beam.
Yeah. And then my wife bought me a Jack Daniels single barrel to have on the bar. And I remember opening it up.
You mean like this one?
Yeah, exactly like that one. And I remember opening it up and trying it, and at the time, that's really not for me. And it sit on the bar for probably over a year, and I never even went back to it. But, after I got into bourbon, I quickly learned like the taters we mentioned earlier, Buffalo Trace, Eagle Rare, Blanton's, and plenty of others out there. But as my palate grew and I was able to enjoy some of the higher proof bourbons, that bottle of Jack Daniels didn't last too long. But yeah, I honestly don't remember what my first bottle was.
Well, I can tell you what the first hunt was, because I had probably about 10 bottles at the time and decided to start this channel. And I'm going like, one of my first shows was called In the Hunt of a Unicorn. Because I come to find out everyone was calling these bottles unicorns, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So I started hunting from them. Like, why don't you have one? Boy, are you new to this? Yeah, actually I am. So I started hunting unicorns, and so my first, it got me into hunting bourbon, and my first bottle that I ever was able to track down was a Colonel E.H. Taylor small batch, and I had to ask for it, and the guy had it in the back. I said, I got one. You want it? And he told me what it was, and going like, damn, that's $80. Does all bourbon cost $80? And they're like, you have no idea, son.
$80 was just the beginning. Of
$80 was just the beginning. Yeah. Now people talk about $200 and $300 bottles that are list price at that, and you're going like, well, $80 sounds like a real deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest mistakes that I made early on for me, was hunting those unicorn bottles.
And thinking you were going to find it.
Well, and then like you said, you find like your E.H. Taylor or your Eagle Rare, and it's overpriced, but I've never had it. I want it, So you overpay in the beginning, and I would just encourage you to be patient. You can find some of these bottles at suggested retail price if you look hard enough. And there's all of those bottles, those unicorn bottles, there's usually something pretty comparable to, if you do your homework, to give you same, or not the same, but similar taste profiles.
And I've got a advice for you as a new person, a newbie and welcome to the bourbon community, by the way. I've got advice for you. If you see a bottle of Pappy 15, and people out there like Daniel know what I'm talking about. Pappy is from the Sazerac, Buffalo Trace. It's one of the hardest bourbons in the world to find, that and the 23. If you see a Pappy 15 on the shelf, don't bother asking the guy, hey, what's the price of that? I can remember doing that, and the guy said to me, if you have to ask, you can't afford it. So if you see a Pappy 15 on the shelf, just don't ask. Don't ask.
Yeah, Pappy is one of the more sought-after bottles, and one you will definitely overpay for if you want it.
Yeah, if you want it. And I ended up finding out the price. I think he wanted $3,000 for it.
Yeah, as you can see, there's none behind me.
Yeah, there's none in my studio either. So this is just a suggestion of how to start collecting bourbon. Figure out the kind of bourbons you like, and don't spend a lot of money at first until you know what you like, and then get involved with a bourbon society, somebody that shares bottles. Go to tastings. Go up to the Bourbon Trail in Kentucky. There's also a Tennessee Bourbon Trail, and I think that Georgia now actually has something called the Georgia Bourbon Trail.
I actually saw that the other day. Yeah. Somebody advertising it as the Georgia Bourbon Trail. So that's the first time I'd seen that.
A lot of these distilleries and places will let you sample what they're making. So head on out to a distillery. I promise you'll have a great time.
Yeah, that's a good recommendation as well. Is hit the distilleries, or even if you want to try something that's a pricier side, maybe try it at a bar or a restaurant somewhere as well. Is another good option before you buy a whole bottle.
Oh yeah, I Knob Creek 9. I remember paying like $20 for it at a bar and going like, I don't like it that much. But $20 was better than $50. So
yeah,
for a whole bottle, or it doesn't even cost that much.
If you buy a Knob Creek 9 and you don't like it, I'll take it from you.
Yeah, there we go. I am not. People know I'm not a Knob Creek. I'm not a Knob Creek 9 fan. I'm not a Russell's Reserve 10 fan. I don't mind drinking them, either one of them. But if I'm going to spend money, I'm gonna get something a little better. But anyways, if you had questions, or you have suggestions, or let us know. Where did you start in your bourbon collection, and what mistakes did you make? I'll tell you, I made a lot of them. I'm sure Daniel's made a few. And so we're here to try to nudge you along into not making the same mistakes we did. So, Daniel, thanks for tagging along with us today. Yeah. We didn't drink a single drop of whiskey. We got to change that.
So I would just say too, Mike, real quick, if I can, if you do have any questions, leave them down in the comments. We'd be glad to try to answer those for you. And then if you have suggestions for us, we'd love to hear those as well.
So we're glad you came along with us for a little guide to how to start your bourbon collection. I've been in it a while. I know Daniel's been in it a while. And don't feel bad if you make a mistake. We all do, buying the wrong bourbon. It happens. More than you believe. So, as always, never drink and drive. Please drink responsibly, and we'll see you next time on the Bourbon Riders podcast. Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks, Mike. Enjoyed it.
Cheers.
Cheers.